Now here's something I got quite recently. This is an example of a Canon Canonflex camera. The Canonflex was Canon's first 35mm SLR camera. This was made in 1959. It's quite an interesting camera. It was certainly ambitious at the time. It's big, it's heavy, well made, interchangeable finder. There was a waist level finder, or had an eyepiece right at the top. You look down in there. That was available as an alternative. I haven't got one of those. What else can I tell you about it? The lens mount. It's the same as the later Canon FL, FD lens mounts, except, and the big difference, and there is a difference, is in the method used to cock and fire the diaphragm to allow the aperture to close down taking a photo. This is an R-type lens, and it's quite different from the later Canon FL lenses. Apparently some lenses can be used on the other camera and some cannot. I can well imagine why not, because the lever at the bottom there is actually in much the same place on the Canon FL mounts, and it would certainly be getting pushed the wrong way, I would think. So what else can I tell you? Shutter speeds, 1 to 1,000th. It's got the B setting, of course, an X setting, which I think would be the, I think that's about a 45th of a second. It might be a 60th, but I think a 45th. On the T setting, the B and T setting marked on the dial there, in order to get the T function to work, where it'll hold the shutter down until you come back, the shutter open until you come back and disturb it, you slide across this switch here. Some people have described that as a shutter lock button. It's not a shutter lock button, it's part of the mechanism for giving you the function T. When you release the shutter stays fully open until you slide that switch back again, and that's its function. Self timer here, it's a little fold down key. Just rotate that, release it at the shutter release button at the top. It doesn't have a separate release button here. The prism slides off. There's a button on the side here that locks it, and it slides off on rails from the back. Very solid construction. You can see the screen there. The screen has a split image focus aid in the middle of it, and let's get this thing back in here, and that works very well indeed. The film type reminder dials up here for film speed, film type. That's its only function. Of course, there's no exposure meter in the camera. There was a clip-on exposure meter that fitted onto two clips at the front here on the top cover. One of the clips on my example is unfortunately gone. I have previously had a Canonflex R2000, which was the updated model of this one, and that had a meter. The meter was quite bulky. It's sat right out here, and it was made the camera somewhat cumbersome to hold. I found I couldn't get my finger comfortably wrapped around the front of the camera to hold it because of the meter filling up that space at the front. The meter coupled to the shutter speed dial from memory. The lens has two aperture dials here. The front one's click stopped, and the back one is for previewing your depth of field. So on normal taking functions, you'd set the aperture on your front ring there, leave the other ring set to fully open, which of course is f1.8. Your viewing screen would be nice and bright to allow you to focus, and as soon as you release the shutter, the aperture would snap down to the set aperture on the front ring. Now, one thing that's particularly odd about the Canonflex is the method of film advance. You've probably noticed that there's no film advance lever on the top. It's on the base of the camera here. And I'm told that you could get 3 exposures per second by rapid use of that film advance lever. Of course, it would have made mounting the camera on a tripod really awkward. I can't imagine that you could cock that without disturbing the position of your camera somewhat on a tripod. It would have been very annoying indeed. The back of the camera, well, it's locked with a key here, but it's a hinged back, and you'll see that it just opens fully, does not detach, so there's nothing to lose, and overall it just makes for a very convenient camera to use. Can I tell you anything else about it? Possibly not an awful lot more to say really. This little window here is your frame counter, and the Canonflex. The Canonflex, as I said, was made in 1959. In 1960 it was replaced with 2 cameras, the Canonflex R2000, which was pretty much this camera with a top speed of a 2,000th of a second instead, and the RP. Now the Canonflex RP was very similar to this, except it didn't have an interchangeable prism. The prism was fixed. Typically it's seen in chrome top, so the entire top piece is chrome, and that was quite similar to this. Top speed of 1,000th. It didn't have a T setting, so there was no switch here, and the lever for setting the self timer was a lever that rotated down in the more traditional fashion rather than the key. The focus screen on the RP had plain ground glass. It didn't have the split image focus aid that this Canonflex has. You'll notice it's got no accessory shoe. Well, on the end of the top cover here, you'll see there's that large boss there. That's to allow you to fit a flash directly, or to fit an accessory shoe. And I have an accessory shoe here which goes on. That has, you can see the flash connection there to connect to your flash cable, and you can mount your flash in the shoe. So that's quite a handy little thing. And what lenses were available? Well, I believe that when the camera was first introduced, there was no wide angle lens available for it. You had your standard lens here, which I think is 50, is it? It's 50. And there was an 85, and there would have been 135, and probably larger, 200 I think, possibly even longer than that. But shortly after that, a 35mm lens was introduced, and that's the reverse telephoto type wide angle lenses that are common with SLRs, because of course they needed a different design for SLR cameras, because they were forced by the design of the camera to have the lens much further away from the film plane than they would have done with a rangefinder camera. Well, I think that's probably about all I can tell you about this today. I was pleased to find this. It didn't work at all when I got it, which I knew about. I expected that to be a fairly simple thing to fix, and fortunately it was a fairly simple thing to fix. Most of my problems lay in the lens, not in the camera body itself, though I still need to open up the top and lubricate a couple of points to make it work better than it currently does. So that's it, Canon's Canonflex, their first 35mm SLR camera from 1959. A solid and well-made camera, and I'm pleased to finally have one for my collection. Thanks for watching.